Let's get to our top point, and our top point comes in the form, I love this, bum, 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 overreactions. We are going to focus on NFC East overreactions because yesterday was a wild day for this division. Yesterday was absolute chaos, and let's start with the chaos in the most chaotic ending in modern football memory as the Broncos came back and beat the Giants 33-32 in a game where the Giants missed 2 extra points. That turned out to be the difference in a game where we saw massive lead changes over and over and over in the last 2 minutes in a game where the Broncos scored 33 points in the fourth quarter. Caroline, what's your overreaction?
Yeah, those TV shows where you just are really dragging through the first couple of episodes and then you find yourself scrolling on your phone because it's kind of boring and you're like, I don't want to watch this. And then the last episode rolls around and you're like, what? What just happened? And it's like, that's the best show I've ever seen ever in my whole entire life after the first 9 episodes were grueling and boring. That is exactly what this Giants-Broncos game was yesterday because it was probably the most fun I've had watching a football game this entire season. And the last 5 minutes of the game, we had 3 lead changes. We had Bo Nix looking absolutely brutal through 3 quarters and then looking like John Elway in the last 5 minutes of that game. It was an absolute blast. And I know that we have a rule on this show that we don't talk about the losing team first. We always give the winning team their flowers. But this game was so weird. I think it warrants a shakeup in what our rules and regulations are for how we dictate discussions. I think my number one overreaction is Jackson Dart has given a team more vibes, more energy, has the best aura, as the kids say, of any young quarterback that we've seen since Joe Burrow. Jackson Dart is doing to the Giants what we saw Joe Burrow do in his second year with the Cincinnati Bengals. And of course, year 1, he tore his ACL, so he didn't have that same kind of level of impact that maybe Jackson Dart has had for the Giants in year 1. And I know the Giants lost, and I know that Jackson Dart threw that absolute back-breaking interception in the fourth quarter that was really kind of the turning point of this game, and you can't do that. You can't do that as a starting quarterback in the National Football League. But the level of cool, calm, collectedness, and confidence that Jackson Dart had, even when it felt like things were going off the rails for the Giants, I thought was so incredibly impressive. You cannot shake the confidence of this guy. There is nothing that you can do that will make Jackson Dart think, man, I don't know if I can do this. Man, I don't know if this is a throw that I can make. Man, I don't know if I can, really make plays against pressure like this that this defense is throwing me. That Jackson Dart has this level of confidence of I don't give an F. The kind of confidence that I think Joe Burrow has, the kind of confidence that I think Baker Mayfield has, even in a loss. I feel like Giants fans should be so incredibly excited and optimistic about what they're getting from their young quarterback because I understand it was a loss, but that's a game that previous iterations of the New York Giants aren't even in, but they were in until the last second because of their young quarterback in Jackson Dart.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You see the numbers there that Benjamin Solak put up. The next gen stats, 149.3 passer rating when they blitzed Jackson Dart. I'm sorry, Caroline. I thought the point of this was overreactions. That's not an overreaction. Look, you're right. This was a sham wow game. But wait, every single time you turn the corner.
But wait, there's more.
Moment to me. Yeah, I know. The biggest moment to me was with a couple minutes to go when everything had collapsed on the Giants and there was just all the reason in the world to lay down and just, No, Jackson Dart came out and led them down the field for what should have been the game-winning touchdown. Jackson Dart made the incredible play from the 2-yard line, 1-yard line after the penalty to try and dive himself into the end zone. It was absolutely epic from Jackson Dart. So I'm with you. I don't even think that's an overreaction. I think right now Giants fans have a ton of hope because they know they got a quarterback that's electric and the rest of the league can't wait to watch it. I'll give you my first overreaction. I've seen enough. Here we are, my first overreaction of the day. The Cowboys have the best offense in the NFL, and they're headed to the playoffs. And I don't give a damn about your defense. I don't care. Y'all can sit here and talk about, they can't stop anybody. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. In fact, today, I think the Cowboys actually have a better offense than the Bengals had last year. So if your argument is, we saw it last year with the Bengals, I would tell you, number one, that Bengals team wasn't healthy throughout the course of the entire season. If their offense had been, I think they would have made the playoffs. Number two, Dak Prescott right now is playing the best football of his career, and it's not even close. And he's throwing to CeeDee Lamb, who comes back in yesterday's game from injury and absolutely opens this offense up to another level. And now all of a sudden, George Pickens, who, don't miss this now, George is not a number 2. George is a number 1, and he's out there playing at a number 2, and he's going to get paid because of it. On top of all of that, Javonte Williams has turned out to be a delightful find at the running back position. They got a tight end in Ferguson that can absolutely be dynamic. This offense for the Cowboys can beat you any way they want to, anyhow they want to, and nobody's going to have an answer for them. The Cowboys are 3-3-1 now. For all of the disaster talk, they're 3-3-1. They're in the thick of the playoff conversation. Their offense is going to score 40 points like they did over and over and over again. Get used to it. The Cowboys are going to score points, and they're going to the playoffs.
I don't disagree with that in the slightest, but man, oh man, how frustrating is it to be a Cowboys fan to see, and I know they're coming off of a win. I get that. But the Cowboys have zero business being 3-3-1 with the offense that they have, the level of explosiveness that they have. How frustrating is that of like, hey, like our team has to score 35 plus to win games because our defense isn't stopping a nosebleed. The good thing is the Cowboys can score 35 plus, but ooh, man, is that not a kind of a recipe for disaster in some games when you're going up against better defenses that are going to be able to stop Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, but easier said than done. Not easy to stop Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, but I'll look at the other side of this matchup. I'll overreact to the other side of this matchup, and that is I am officially concerned about Jayden Daniels' availability. I'm officially concerned about the hits that Jayden Daniels is taking and the injuries that he's sustaining because of it. Because this Commanders team will ebb and flow as Jayden Daniels ebbs and flows. I don't think that's an overreaction in the slightest. I mean, the Commanders are a miserable franchise. Insert Jayden Daniels, and all of a sudden, you're in the NFC Championship game. So if Jayden Daniels cannot be available for the better part of 17 games, if Jayden Daniels is on again, off again, on the field, off the field due to injury, this Commanders team it not just isn't going to, make a run in the playoffs. This Commanders team isn't going to make the playoffs. The Commanders right now are the worst team in the NFC East. Those weren't the expectations for this team. The expectations for this team were Jayden Daniels MVP and make it right back into the NFC Championship game, make it right back into a Super Bowl conversation. But we had Jayden Daniels miss time earlier this season with the left knee injury. He comes back now. He's going under an evaluation and an MRI to really look at how bad this right hamstring injury is that he suffered yesterday and had to leave the game for a good part of that game yesterday. So it was the hamstring. Now it's the knee. The offensive line, I don't think, can protect Jayden Daniels enough. His style of play opens him up to more injury. And that is, I think, Jayden Daniels' style of play is going to be, his rise and his demise. The style of play is what makes Jayden Daniels so exciting. His style of play, the rollouts, the extending plays, off-platform throws, the improvisation that Jayden Daniels has shown, like that's what makes this team so great and him so great as a quarterback. It also opens him up to more and more unnecessary hits. So I'm concerned, Fitz, about Jayden Daniels' availability and this Commanders team being able to win games without him.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I don't think that's an overreaction. And without him, the Commanders are the worst team in their division. The Giants are on the rise with Jackson. I know that they lost, but
yeah,
I feel like the Giants gave us some hope. And right now, Washington sort of remembers what that hope was like a year ago today. Right now, I think they're concerned. No Jayden Daniels. If you got Marcus Mariota for the rest, for any sustainable amount of time, I should say, that's going to make a big difference. What about the Eagles? The Eagles win yesterday over the Vikings. Are we going to be able to overreact to this? Can we say, Caroline Fenton, that the Philadelphia Eagles are fixed? You willing to go there?
They're fixed. The Eagles are back. The Eagles are back. And look, it was not an overreaction to say just a couple of weeks ago that the Eagles were broken because the Eagles wanted to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game and run it with Saquon Barkley like 6 times. I go, what are we doing? That's not your recipe for success. That's not a lack of talent. That's not a team just being better than you. That is a fundamental issue within play calling. That is your offensive coordinator not having a feel or an idea for how you want to win football games. That is letting that man right there, A.J. Brown, dictate what you do in terms of play calling, what you do in the passing game, because A.J. Brown's upset, because Devontae Smith's upset, because they're not getting what they want. They're not getting fed the ball. That felt like there was just a fundamental crack in the armor and what the Eagles wanted to do. But now we see what they did yesterday against the Minnesota Vikings. Jalen Hurts had one more incompletion than he did have touchdown passes yesterday. That Devontae Smith got the ball, 9 catches, 183 yards and a touchdown. A.J. Brown got fed 4 receptions, 121 yards and 2 touchdowns. They didn't need to run the ball effectively yesterday, Fitzy, because they were hitting in the passing game so well. So a team that felt broken because they just didn't have it felt like an identity offensively. They weren't playing to their identity. Now, all of a sudden, this passing game is figured out, and they can kill you in 2 types of ways, whether it's with Saquon on the ground or with those 2 through the air, with Jalen Hurts playing incredibly effectively. Jalen Hurts, doing what he does best, I think. Like, the Eagles are fixed. If we had any concern about the Eagles repeating and going right back to the Super Bowl, I think what we saw yesterday can ease any of those concerns. The Eagles are a Super Bowl team.
Look, you're right. I do believe the Eagles are a Super Bowl caliber football team. I also think it's probably fair to just say, hey, at this point, with Philly particularly, I'm not sure they were ever really broken. I think the problem with Philly for most of us is that the Eagles are willing to do whatever each week they think will win them that football game. And that's going to drive fans crazy. It's going to drive media crazy because, frankly, if they look at it and say, now this is a running week, they're going to run the football. And if they look at it and say, now this is a passing week, they're going to pass the football, which, by the way, every team should do. But very few teams are capable of simply deciding, hey, today we're going to look left, today we're going to look right. I think that's who the Philadelphia Eagles are, and we should have learned that last year. That's exactly who the Eagles were throughout the course of last year. The discourse all season long was like, well, they're not using the passing game, and they're not using the weapons they have. Everything feels broken. And then when they needed those weapons, they used them. I think yesterday was a really good reminder that the Philadelphia Eagles are not going to be beholden to fantasy football. They don't give a damn what any of us have to say on any of our shows. They are simply going to, every single week, come in with the game plan they think helps them win. And when we see results like this, we become comfortable with that. But also, look at Saquon's numbers yesterday, 18 carries, 44 yards. If they lose that game, we're going to sit here and say, oh, well, they didn't run the ball as well as they need. That's the lose-lose of Philadelphia. The reality of it is the Eagles every week are going to slice and dice you. However, you're not ready to be sliced and diced. So you're right. I don't think it's an overreaction that the Eagles are headed to Super Bowl caliber games. I think they're going to be right in the thick of it all the way through. I think the overreaction was everybody, including us at times, leading up to this, screaming about how it was broken, when in fact, that's just how the Eagles are built. The Eagles are built to beat you ugly, whatever that means, every single week.
I didn't feel like that was an overreaction, though, really, because it felt so just wrong. It felt so icky. When you're watching a horror movie and you see someone go into the dark basement with a killer in the house instead of just walking outside and going into their car. What are you doing? It's so obvious that what you're doing is so dumb. Stop doing that. You're yelling at the TV. That's how I felt watching the Eagles for several weeks whenever they just kept throwing the football when the passing game wasn't working. I'm like, what are you doing? It is so obvious that what you're doing is silly. It is so obvious that that's not how you want to win football games. It just felt like, whether it was on the field, whether it was play calling, whether it was off the field, with all of the A.J. Brown, the tweets, the discussions in media scrums with reporters after games of him being very obviously upset and frustrated with how he wasn't getting the ball. It just felt like there was so much tension building up. And then you double that down with the fact that the Eagles lost 2 games in a row. It's like, oh, the tension feels like it's starting to boil over. Now, all of a sudden, the passing game is clicking. You're winning games again. You win a game on the road. All is well in Eagle Land.
Tension is also building in Major League Baseball. What a weekend it was. We're going to try and put some perspective around what we saw from Shohei. Robert Flores is going to join us next. We'll figure it out. You see it here. Shohei Ohtani has a three home run, 10 strikeout game. The definition of a unicorn, the definition of video game numbers. The greatest talent we'll ever see touch a baseball field. Dodgers Nation may have a little bias on that. So let's break it down. We're going to break down this history now. The host of MLB Central on MLB Network, Robert Flores, joins us. Really appreciate your time, Robert. I am the farthest thing from a baseball historian, so I am scared to say this. So instead, I will give it to you. Was this the greatest performance in baseball history?
I think it was. He is a middle of the order bat or top of the order bat, capable of hitting 50 home runs and stealing 50 bags in a season, which we did in 2024. And oh, by the way, he's a top of the rotation pitcher that strikes out 10 in an LCS game in which he hits 3 home runs in. So I think Shohei Ohtani is the greatest baseball player to ever play. With apologies to Babe Ruth, with apologies to Barry Bonds, with apologies to Willie Mays, there's no one like Shohei Ohtani. And no disrespect to Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth, he didn't have to get on a plane. Every game was a train ride or a car ride, taking on guys that were plumbers and accountants and farmers in the off season. So what this guy is unbelievable, and I hope we don't take it for granted.
I'm so with you there. And normally, whenever I make statements like that, it feels hyperbolic. It feels like we're prisoners of the moment. But when I said I think we
Agreed.
just watched the single greatest performance from a baseball player in history, I didn't feel like that was hyperbolic in the slightest. So it just put this into perspective for us. If there is any way that we can rationalize and put context to Shohei's performance, what other performance, maybe in sports history, comes close to what we saw Shohei do on Friday night?
How about a random little league where the kid has his parents forge his birth certificate? How about that? Let's. I mean, that's kind of what it felt like. I was watching it, going, this what he does is like, pick out the best athlete in your town that dominates, or back in the day before travel baseball, that would dominate everything, whether it's Little League baseball or rec basketball or Pop Warner football. He's always the best kid on the field, no matter what type of field it is. And that's what Shohei Ohtani is. And like I said, in this day and age of where people hate everything and they're so quick to dismiss it and say that what they're seeing now isn't as good as what they saw years ago or when they were kids. Shohei Ohtani is the exception to that. I mean, I can't. I'm 55 years old and I have never seen a player like him, and I don't think we've ever seen a player like this. And like I said, I just hope. And what we say on our show all the time, I just hope we don't take it for granted and we can kind of appreciate what we're all witnessing.
With that in mind, do you feel like how important was this performance in this moment? Because certainly the doubters were starting to get a little loud about, well, he's not doing it in the playoffs at the same level until he has this performance.
Yeah, no, I think it was important. And make no mistake about it. Look, Shohei is in this age of where we know everything about everyone. He is this sort of mystery man, right? We rarely see him out, and it's not like he's active on Instagram or social media. He doesn't really give a whole lot of interviews, save for the pre and the post game interviews, which he's required to do. But yeah, I think he heard the whispers of, all right, well, he's great in the regular season, but man, the past 2 postseasons, the World Series last year, he wasn't great. Oh, by the way, he was dealing with a banged up shoulder. But this postseason, he's kind of in a slump. What's going on here? Lefties have given him trouble. I think he heard that, or I think he heard whispers of that. And I really think that performance was a big blank you to anyone that dared to doubt his greatness.
He's Batman. Literally, we know
That's
nothing
right.
about the man, but we know that he is a superhero.
Yeah.
But we heard Dave Roberts, after they punched their ticket to the World Series, we heard Dave Roberts say, hey, 4 more wins and then we'll really ruin baseball. And we've heard a lot of rumblings and discussion about how, the payroll of the Dodgers is ruining Major League Baseball. What would you have to say about that?
Well, Major League Baseball hasn't had a repeat champion since 2000. So we're going on a quarter century. Now, obviously, the Dodgers are in a very good position to end that streak this year. But I think when you look at 2 years ago, the Rangers and the Diamondbacks were in the World Series, and ultimately won by the Texas Rangers. The Milwaukee Brewers were in the LCS this year. Um, the Seattle Mariners, I'm not sure what their payroll is. Toronto Blue Jays, obviously their payroll is pretty up, it's up there. So I think that over the past handful of years, there's been a nice kind of snapshot of a little bit of everything from various size markets. Sure, you've got the big heavy hitters like the Yankees and the Dodgers and the Red Sox and the Cubs, but the Tampa Bay Rays, save for this year, always seem to be in the mix, or at least frequently in the mix for the postseason. The Milwaukee Brewers, as I mentioned, they had the best record in baseball and made it all the way to the LCS. So I think some of it is overstated and overblown a little bit. I think baseball's in a great place.
Would you say that what we saw makes Shohei the best athlete in any sport right now?
Oh, now that's a great one. That is because it's so difficult. That's difficult to say because you have so many of these outstanding track and field athletes and soccer players and certainly football players as well. So I think Shohei Ohtani, I will say this, I think he's among the most recognizable athletes around the world. I would put him up there with LeBron James, with the greatest soccer players around the world, the greatest football players around the world. He is in that rarefied air where it's like the one name, right? It's the one name celebrity, Ohtani. That's really it. There's LeBron, Ohtani, Madonna. If you want to go, is she still a celebrity?
Yeah, no, we're still.
Oh yeah,
Madonna's
still an icon.
We're getting, yeah, he's the Madonna
Seal.
of sports. I'm in on this. I'm in.
Yeah, J-Lo, all of it. I think Ohtani probably can carry a tune better than J-Lo. So and he can hit lefties and go deep and strike out 10.
J-Lo can't do that. She can't.
She
She can
cannot.
do a lot, but she cannot do everything. But yeah, it's a privilege to be able to watch what Shohei Ohtani does on any given night. But we also have a fascinating matchup on the AL side of things. I thought earlier in that series, like this isn't even going back to Seattle. The Mariners have this
Right.
locked up after the first couple of games. Now, series is tied. The Blue Jays force a game 7. What have you made of this series so far? The Blue Jays' ability to fight back, and then George Kirby and Shane Bieber, the matchup that we'll have on the mound tonight.
Well, I think what has been interesting to me in this first 6 games of this series is that I think the Mariners going in had a decided advantage on paper with their starting rotation, but that advantage we haven't really seen that. In this series alone, I don't think that the Mariners have gotten much length or much production from their starting rotation. George Kirby, who went earlier in this series, gave up a postseason record 8 runs. So they've had to rely on their bullpen, and for the most part, the bullpen has been up to snuff. But I think one thing that I'm going to keep an eye on is what we saw a little bit last night. Which team is going to avoid? Which team is not going to make the mistake? Which team is going to field the ball cleanly, make the defensive plays? The Mariners made 3 errors yesterday. I think that had a factor in the game, certainly. And also the Blue Jays' ability to do the little things, move the runner over, put the ball in play, bunt if necessary, go first to third, take the extra base. If that is going to be the case, then I think it's the Blue Jays tonight. But that being said, I think 7 of the last 8 home teams have lost game 7s in postseason history. So we'll see. It should be a lot of fun. It's going to be an electric atmosphere tonight in Toronto.
We just had Vlad up on the screen. What do you make of his performance so far this postseason?
Yeah, I think he's sort of put the baseball world on notice. He's been a known commodity. He's been an MVP contender. He's been a superstar of this league, but I think this postseason has taken him to another level. And guys, he's an excellent hitter, which I think everyone knew, but he has been, what he has shown sports fans and baseball fans in particular is that he's better defensively. He's a very good base runner, and he's built for the moment. He's had some huge moments in this postseason, in this series. So I think that he has taken that next step of, like I said, he was already a star, but I think he's gone into superstar status now with this series and this postseason.
And speaking of that, I would love to see a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. take on this Dodgers team, but of course they have to get there first. They have to punch their ticket. So from what you've seen from both the Mariners and the Blue Jays, who do you think would be a better matchup for the Dodgers in the World Series? Loaded question.
Is there?
I know.
Well, is there a way that the Blue Jays and Mariners can combine to perform, like to form one like super giant team, like the Monstars? I mean, look, I'm kind of being
Like the Jets and
facetious
Sharks.
here a little. Yes, absolutely. But look, I think no matter if it's the Blue Jays or the Mariners, clearly it's not take to say that if it's either the Mariners or the Blue Jays, they're going to be the underdog to the Dodgers. That's just the way it's going to be. That being said, we've seen some strange things in this year's postseason and in Major League Baseball's postseason history. Who would have thought that the '88 Los Angeles Dodgers would beat the Oakland A's with Canseco and McGuire and Eckersley? I saw the best team I ever saw in person was the 2019 Astros, and they couldn't figure out how to win a game at home in the World Series and ended up losing to the Washington Nationals. So I think the Dodgers will be a pretty heavy favorite. However, I'm not ready to say that they're just going to mow through if it's the Mariners and whether it's the Mariners or the Blue Jays. And remember, guys, by the time Game 1 of the World Series rolls around, the Dodgers will have had 7-8 days off. So who knows what kind of factor that might play in it as well.
I love the rust. We're already at rest or rust. That's how good the Dodgers are. Okay, a team not as good as the Dodgers trying to get there would be San Francisco. Got to talk to you about some of the stuff that's happening, not on the field, but off the field right now. What do you make of the Giants zeroing in on what I think is a surprising hire to some? The first time we're seeing Tony Vitello from Tennessee. What do you make of this?
I'm very surprised. But look, I know Buster Posey he's the guy that's calling the shots, one of the great catchers of his generation, one of the great San Francisco Giants in history. He is not going to do something without having studied it extensively, without doing his research on the implications, and also Tony Vitello himself. So, I think the game has changed. The college game has changed. They have their own analytics department, certainly not quite to the extent that major league teams do across the league. But yeah, I was a little surprised, but hey, it certainly makes for good copy and good headlines and good conversation. I would be intrigued. I definitely will be very, very intrigued to see how it's going to work out should they decide they want to go that route.
That's definitely a different direction, that is for sure. But one more managerial related question for you before we get you out of here. There's been a lot of reports about the Angels and Albert Pujols, bringing him in a leadership position. What's the latest on that? And what do you make of Albert Pujols potentially in a leadership spot?
Well, I know he's also interviewed with the Baltimore Orioles. So Albert is very, very serious about this. There's a reason he managed in the Dominican Winter League last off season. It was to show major league teams that had openings that, hey, I'm committed to this, that I'm willing to do this, that I'm serious about it. And we've been fortunate enough to have Albert Pujols be part of MLB Network for the past couple of years. And there is not anyone, I'm totally convinced he could do it because he knows the game and he has a great way of connecting with people. He is one of the sweetest men you'll ever come across. And I think that he has a way of connecting with players of all types, whether they're superstars or middle of the road grinders or American, Hispanic, Dominican, Venezuelan. So his resume speaks for itself. So if he is tabbed, whether it's the Angels or the Orioles or another team that has an opening, I think he'll do a great job. I think he'll go in there and make a difference.
Watch him on MLB Central on MLB Network. Follow him on social media at RoFlo. Robert Flores, we really appreciate your time, man. Thanks for coming on with us this morning.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Sorry, I just totally spaced out and didn't come on last Monday. But I was ready and
you knew we needed you on Shohei.
Happy to get you this time.
We needed you on Shohei. That's perfectly done by you.
That's it.
Thanks for hanging out.
Anytime you need me. Have a great week, guys.
Oh, it's great
Thanks
stuff,
so much.
and
Appreciate
it's been a great series. Can't wait for Game 7. In the meantime, I can't wait to take a victory lap. Oh, I've been telling you about the Colts for a minute. God, it feels good to be right. Colt Fan Talk says, we aren't just beating teams, we're absolutely destroying them. I've seen enough Super Bowl contenders. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard. Welcome aboard the entire hype train known as Colts Kingdom, I guess we're going to go with. I don't know what we're going with. I know.
I don't think you can call it that. No, that's taken.
Well, I mean, so
Kingdom.
Yeah, but you also already had a Raider Nation, and then everybody else became something, a Steeler Nation, and Jets Nation. Everybody took Nation.
Nation's not creative enough. Like Bang Bang Niner Gang. Like you can't be like Bang Bang Colts Gang. That's the 49ers thing.
Well, Colts and Kingdom have a similar
Colts
sound.
Stampede.
Okay, here's the thing. Whatever it is, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz, I'm taking a big old victory lap. If this is the moment that you're watching people tell you, well, nobody saw this coming, I would say you should have been watching Yahoo Sports Daily from the absolute beginning. In fact, if you've been watching me all summer, I predicted over the course of the summer that comeback player of the year or it would be Daniel Jones and that we would see the Colts win their division. And I'm not surprised by any of this because if you look over the last couple of years, I will remind you, the Colts have been a 500 team with terrible quarterback play. The Colts have been a 500 team with the likes of Gardner Minshew and Joe Flacco trying to prop up whatever their quarterback position was. And then you bring in Daniel Jones, who we've seen some success from, and you bring Daniel Jones to Shane Steichen, who in the past has worked with Jalen Hurts and had tremendous success. That's how he got the job where he is as a head coach. Now you look at this. Look at the numbers. He's efficient at everything he does. 295 yards, 2 touchdowns, 113.4 passer rating. This is a Daniel Jones that's playing really confidently and smart football in that offense. In that offense, surrounded by wide receiver weapons with a very good offensive line, a tight end that I loved in the draft, and what looks like, again, is maybe the best running back in the NFL. Like, this is not rocket science. They are built to beat the snot out of most football teams. So when your favorite team gets beat badly by the Colts, instead of looking at it and saying, oh my God, I can't believe we just lost to the Colts, you should look at your TV and say, Damn it, Fitz told me this over the summer. The Colts really are that good. This is a team, Caroline, right now. You cannot tell me with the way the AFC is laid out that the Colts are not a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I won't hear it because the offense is good enough and the defense, while not spectacular, will be good enough to get the stops it needs. The Colts right now, to me, look like they could end up the number 1 seed in the AFC, and they absolutely could find themselves in the Super Bowl.
If I just blind resumed the Indianapolis Colts and I gave little tidbits of how this team has now gotten to this point of being 7-1 on the season, I would say, okay, look, you have a quarterback that's incredibly effective and efficient. You have a quarterback that's only been sacked 6 times through 7 games, 6-1 through the season, not 7-1, 6 times through 7 games. It's an offensive line. That's also credit to Daniel Jones, who is evading some of these sacks. So you have a quarterback that's been effective, efficient, and explosive. He's not taking silly sacks. You have an elite running back, if not one of the best, if not the best in the National Football League. Like, I think we need to be talking about Jonathan Taylor in a potential league MVP conversation. That's how good Jonathan Taylor has been. He now has 3 touchdowns in 3 different games this season. And then you also look at the Colts receiving core. While it's not overly sexy, you don't have any of these, star elite receivers in that conversation. You have Alec Pierce, who's been incredibly reliable, Michael Pittman Jr., Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end out of Penn State, who has been awesome so far this season. So you have a reliable quarterback, an elite running back, a deep and explosive receiving core, a defense that's like fine. They're not great. They're not elite, but they're fine. They're not as much of a liability as like the Cowboys defense is to the Cowboys offense. If I just presented those things to you on a blind resume, you would say, yes, like that is the formula for a Super Bowl team. Like, those are all of the boxes that you would want a Super Bowl contender to be checking. I think the reason why everyone is really hesitant to say that, yes, legitimately the Colts are a Super Bowl contender is the fact that they're the Colts and it's Daniel Jones. And look, I get it. I understand it. I think one thing that really kind of made me pay attention, that like now, okay, the Colts, like you legitimately have my attention, was yesterday in the 3rd quarter when I was watching this game. The Chargers score touchdown on their first possession of the second half. They make it 23-10. And then the Colts respond. And then the Chargers respond again. Now it's 1-3, and it's now 31-17. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, like the Chargers have something here. There is plenty of time for the Chargers to make a comeback. But then on the next possession, the Colts go on a 5-play, 73-yard drive, take up 2 minutes and 40 seconds of clock, incredibly efficient, and go up 38-17. And it felt like any chance for a comeback was just completely squandered there. That when the Colts needed to respond, they absolutely positively did. That's what Super Bowl contending teams do. They respond. They close the door on any potential comeback. But I will poke one hole in the Super Bowl argument here, because it feels like through mid to late October, it feels like we have everything figured out, right? It feels like we know what a lot of these teams are. We can place a label on a lot of these teams of Super Bowl contenders or first overall pick contenders. But just looking at the Colts schedule, I'm going to hold back from calling them legitimate Super Bowl contenders. They'll likely win that division. They will make the playoffs, and it's a high likelihood that the Colts can make some splashes in the postseason. But who have the Colts beaten? The crummy, crappy Dolphins, the inconsistent Broncos, the Titans who just fired their coach, sorry, Fitz, the crummy, crappy Raiders, the inconsistent Cardinals, and the banged-up Chargers. The one legitimate Super Bowl contending team that they have played so far in their schedule was the Rams, and they lost. So they've been beating up on bad teams. They've been beating up on inconsistent teams. I need to see the Colts beat a legitimate Super Bowl contender, because in order to be one, you have to beat one, and they haven't done that yet.
But they still have left on their schedule the Titans, a bad, inconsistent, let's say a Steelers team I'm not scared of, a Falcons team that's inconsistent, a Texans team that's inconsistent, a Jags team that's inconsistent. Like, they got a lot of winnable games. To your point, they could lose to the Chiefs, who they play on November 23rd, and still find themselves with home field advantage in the playoffs. That's how, because they've got a couple of games up on the Chiefs right now. So you're going to have to go through Indy. Here's the reality of it to me, Caroline. I think for so many fans, they're looking at it and saying, it's the Colts, it's Daniel Jones, I'm not scared of them. Let me just remind you, if your favorite team today has a bad quarterback situation, what you should really be thinking about is the fact that your front office was not as smart as the Colts front office because they didn't identify Daniel Jones as the talent. Your head coach is not as good as Shane Steichen because he didn't figure out that he could get the most out of Daniel Jones. And you're now sitting here in a quarterback situation when your favorite team could have had Daniel Jones. I think part of what everybody needs to look at here just isn't just the fact that Daniel Jones is playing at this level. You need to look, Jets fans, Raiders fans, Saints fans, look across the board. If you have a bad quarterback situation and you're saying today, we are screwed at the quarterback spot, we can't figure it out, remind yourself, there was a clear answer. There was a clear answer. Daniel Jones doing what he's doing today is proof positive that Daniel Jones can play in this league. And if your favorite team didn't go get him, that's on your favorite team. And one of the things that is going to drive so many fans crazy through this whole process is not only acknowledging that the Colts are good and not only acknowledging that Daniel Jones is very good, but also looking in the mirror and realizing that your favorite team sucks at so many different levels that your favorite team couldn't identify that greatness, couldn't figure out a way to get it out of him, and couldn't figure out how to solve the quarterback position when the Colts did. It's jealousy. It's a disease, and it's hindering everybody.
I mean, I think we all need to acknowledge that this is not the same Daniel Jones. Just like at a certain point, we all had to acknowledge that Sam Darnold in Minnesota was not the same Sam Darnold. The same way that when Geno was in Seattle, we had to acknowledge this is not the same Geno Smith. It feels uncomfortable whenever we feel like our minds are made up and we are forced to change our minds and our perception of what players are and can be. This is not the same Daniel Jones. Sorry, Giants fans. You have your own new quarterback now, okay? Focus on the Jackson Dart of it all. This Daniel Jones, this iteration of Daniel Jones is so wildly different. And even though any other team in the National Football League could have signed up for Daniel Jones's efforts, I don't think that any other coach in the NFL could get out of Daniel Jones what Shane Steichen is now getting out of Daniel Jones. Because it's not just Daniel Jones. It's the infrastructure around him. It's an offensive-minded head coach who is known to be a quarterback guru. It's the offensive line, it's the receiving core, and it's Jonathan Taylor. It is all of these puzzle pieces that have come together and fit so perfectly to get out of Daniel Jones what we're now seeing.
Which is why Shane Steichen's going to be Coach of the Year, too. Book it. I'm all in on this Colts love. All right, coming up from one coach that deserves love to a coach that now needs some love. Billy Napier out at Florida. What's next for the Gators? We'll figure it out. If John Gruden, Deion Sanders, or any non-P4 head coaches on your list, seek help. That from Gator season as we are trying to figure out what it looks like for the Florida Gators at the head coaching position. Billy Napier let go this weekend. And look, the rumblings were big, right, Caroline? The rumblings were loud. We really felt like something was going to happen, and it has happened. And now this is where things get really interesting because Florida's trying to figure out who their next coach is. And I'm not sure that there's a great answer. Look, I'll just say, Caroline, I'm just not sure how appealing the Florida job is to a lot of coaches that have good jobs.
Why?
So let's look at Lane Kiffin. We'll go to Lane Kiffin as the easiest example. Everybody says, well, Lane to Florida. Why would Lane Kiffin leave Ole Miss to go to Florida when he's in a situation where, let's be real, he lost over the weekend? Nobody's calling for his job. At the end of the day, Lane Kiffin is a top 10 paid coach in all of college football. He's in a situation now where he can stay at Ole Miss for the rest of his life. And if he loses a couple of games every year, nobody's going to be calling for his head. He has a real shot at a national championship. They were number 5 last week going into that, right? Like, he absolutely can get the resources necessary to win a championship. They're probably going to be a college football playoff team this year. I believe in modern NIL, as much as we talk about proximity now, if you can pay people and you have a jet, you can get anybody to come from anywhere. So modern NIL, if you pay people, they'll come play for you. The coaches aren't going to make astronomically more to play for Florida. So the only real reason anybody can give me is the history of the program. And in modern college football, I don't think history matters anymore. We're now in a college football where Vandy and Georgia Tech and teams like that can suddenly compete for national championships. You don't need the brand of Florida to win anymore. So your brand doesn't offer you enough extra equity to make it worth what it does to your quality of life to go to Florida, where all of a sudden 2 years in, you might be fired for losing the same games that right now doesn't even interrupt Lane Kiffin when he goes to Home Depot.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and I heard and agreed on the Lane Kiffin front, but I think there's two different conversations that we can have. How desirable is this job realistically for Lane Kiffin, and how desirable is this job for any other coach in Power 4? For Lane Kiffin, I think it's fair to question, like, how much better of a job is Florida right now than Ole Miss? Because Ole Miss is getting investment. I mean, Ole Miss spent more money on their transfer portal class last year than any other program, allegedly, reportedly, in all of college football. Like, Lane Kiffin's getting investment. Lane Kiffin has support from the boosters and from the collectives. That Lane Kiffin has proven that he can attract the best talent in the country to come to Oxford, Mississippi. That Ole Miss is now in the national conversation. That is something that would be inconceivable to a lot of college football fans like 5 to 10 years ago. Ole Miss was kind of a middling team in the SEC 5 years ago, and now Ole Miss has a clear and direct path to the college football playoff. So I don't know what Florida can offer Lane Kiffin that Ole Miss can't, other than a more rabid fan base. I mean, we've heard Lane Kiffin beg and plead the fan base and the student section to just show up for games. You're not going to have to do that at Florida. So I think the Lane Kiffin one is separate. But to act like Florida is not one of the most desirable jobs in the country, I think is wild. Like, I don't know how you can make an argument for that, because Florida is smack dab in the middle of one of the most talent-rich states in America. I would put Florida right up there with Texas and California, with some of the most talented players in the country. Recruiting in-state is wildly easy. And sure, recruiting in-state maybe isn't as important now as it was 10 to 15 years ago. It's still important. At Ole Miss in Mississippi, or really any other state in the country, you can find some solid 3s and 4 stars, but you're not going to find 5-star elite players. They grow in your backyard in Florida. You also have so much money and booster support, alumni support at Florida, that there is a proven, recipe for success at Florida. So while that might not be different for Lane Kiffin or Ole Miss, I wonder how different that it is for Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri. Look, Eli Drinkwitz has brought Missouri from a 6-6 football team to now nationally relevant, and again, a clear path to the college football playoff. I would say it's wildly easier to recruit to the transfer portal or out of high school for kids to come to Florida versus central Missouri. I'm from Missouri. I can say that, okay? It's cold in Missouri. There's not a whole lot going on at Columbia, Missouri. It's much easier to sell Gainesville than it is to sell Columbia. Missouri doesn't have, and I know that you say historical success doesn't matter as much now in this this era as it used to, and I would agree with that. But I still do think that a proven track record of success is so much easier to sell to anybody, whether it's coaches or recruits, than a program that doesn't have that. Missouri doesn't have that rich history and tradition of winning. Florida does. So I think that could be an attractive job for a guy like Eli Drinkwitz. Don't tell me that Florida isn't a more attractive job to a guy like Brent Key at Georgia Tech. At Georgia Tech, you have those academic boundaries that you have to get over. At Georgia Tech, you don't have that same level of investment from boosters. You don't have the same amount of, alumni support available. You don't have the same student support, institutional buy-in at Georgia Tech that you do at Florida. So I can understand the argument, probably do agree with the argument that what Florida can offer Lane Kiffin isn't that much better than what he's now getting at Ole Miss. But for guys at programs like Brent Key at Georgia Tech, Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri, Alex Golish at South Florida, like Florida absolutely would be a step up and absolutely is a desirable job. I think Florida is one of the best jobs in the country. Yes, there are incredibly high expectations, but don't you want to be somewhere where national championships are the standard? Isn't that what you sign up to do when you're a football coach, is to win games and to win championships? I think pressure, frankly, Fitz, is a privilege.
Look, pressure is a privilege. I agree with you. Every candidate you just named, it would be a step up to go to Florida because Florida is a clearly better program than those. I don't think what you just mentioned, though, I think there's a difference between expectation to win championships and unrealistic expectations. I think there are a bunch of college football fan bases that are stuck in what college football was 15 years ago. There's a bunch of Florida fans that are stuck in what Florida was during Spurrier's legacy, right? Like during Urban Meyer's time. Like this is a new modern college football landscape. And I don't believe right now that the transfer portal has a better opportunity for Florida than it does for most other comparable schools. Like if we were basically deciding what shelf of liquor, as I always like to do, I think Florida's on a very high shelf. It is. But is it on a wildly different shelf than any other major prominent college football program? I don't believe so. I don't think Florida is any better job today than Oklahoma is. I don't think Florida is any better job than most prominent college football positions are. Now, Missouri is a much different, just look at your stadium size. Yeah, it's an easy way. Look at your stadium size and ask yourself, would it be the afternoon game for the SEC slate of the week? And if you ask yourself that and say yes, then I think we're probably in a pretty comparable situation. It's a step up for Vandy. It's a step up for Georgia Tech. It's a step up for almost any ACC school. Is it a step up for the top of the Big 12? I don't think so. The top of the Big 10? I don't think so. Like, if you start looking across the board, if you mentioned the expectations of pressure is a privilege, I think the expectation should be that we are in the conversation constantly. And if that was the expectation, you're right, that is a privilege. If the expectation is simply we must win national championships to maintain your job, I just don't think that's realistic. In the modern college football landscape, it's going to be tougher and tougher for teams to win multiple championships. We just talked about Major League Baseball a minute ago. They haven't had a repeat champion in the 2000s, right? Like, so you look across the board, look at the NBA, how hard it is to go back to back in the NBA. Look at the NFL and how hard it is to go back to back. That is what the NFL landscape is, or the college football landscape is at this point. It's just like every other team. So what you're really trying to get is proximity. And that's why I argue constantly, if you are a playoff team, you are in a great situation. If you're not in a playoff team, you need to rethink things. It wasn't working with Napier. But if the expectation is playoffs, then yes, it's a great job. If the expectation is championship or bust, then you got a bunch of fans of college football that don't understand the modern college football landscape at all.
But let's be clear here. Billy Napier didn't get fired because he didn't win a national championship. Billy
Correct.
Napier got fired because his best year in 4 years at Florida was 7-5. Because Billy Napier was just barely scraping by to beat Mississippi State, a team that hasn't won a conference game in 2 years? Like, it's because Billy Napier was so far away from even having a thought about the national championship. Billy Napier was a far cry away from getting to Atlanta in the SEC championship, much less to the national championship conversation. I think right now, if you tell a Florida fan, hey, your next coach can get you to the college football playoff, he's not going to win a championship, but he'll get you to the college football playoff, I think Florida fans would sign up for that right now. Of course, national championships are going to be, the hope. But right now, I think where Florida is as a program, college football playoff would be incredibly adequate. If Indiana can do it, if Vanderbilt can be in the conversation, if SMU can do it, Why not Florida? I think that this level of success that some of these middle tier teams have had in the 12-team college football playoff era, in the NIL era, I think that is kind of what is ramping up these expectations for Florida. I think Florida fans, LSU fans, Florida State fans, all of these premier programs that have fallen short of expectations are looking at what the Vanderbilts are doing and saying, why not us?
Florida fans are frustrated. Coming up, Miami fans wildly frustrated. Is it time for a change? We'll give you some of the breaking reporting on it coming up next. Yahoo Sports Daily.
I mean, if you are negatively affecting the football team routinely, I don't have a choice but to, assess a different player, and I have to coach a lot better as well. So we're going to find out who and what we're made of.
Just trying to maneuver everything and trying to build a collection of guys to kind of bring along with me, and I got to be able to multitask, if that makes sense. Be able to do that, and while doing that, kind of continue to get the whatever it was last year and the years prior for myself to get going again and get in that flow.
Wildly confusing messaging from two of the faces of the Miami Dolphins. But now we have news, rap sheet, Ian Rappaport saying on the Miami Dolphins, no changes are expected at this time, I'm told, which matches some of what Adam Schefter was also saying this morning on ESPN and raises a great question. Is it time to make a change? Whether it's coach or quarterback, something's broken for the Dolphins. They sit at 1-6. So, Caroline, in your eyes, is it time to make a change?
Yes. Like, this is so shocking to me that the Dolphins don't feel any sort of push or pressure or need or desire to make a change. This is a terrible football team. This is a team that has won one game, and this is a team that in a lot of their losses, they have gotten blown out. Like, I felt like yesterday had to have been the tipping point for Tua Tagovailoa. He looked completely lost. He looked completely clueless. He looked scared. He looked just like not even like he belonged on a National Football League football field. I mean, 12 of 23, only 100 yards, 3 interceptions, not a single touchdown. Tua looked like he had no idea what was going on out there. And then you hear his comments that he made post-game about how he feels like he has to multitask and, play quarterback and be a leader. Isn't that your job? as a starting quarterback is to play quarterback effectively and efficiently, not anything that he has done so far this season, and also be a leader in the locker room. Like, that is your job as a starting quarterback. Tua knows that. I mean, Tua played for Nick Saban in Alabama. Tua's now been in the NFL for what? This is season 6? Like, he knows that that's his job. He knows that that's his expectation. And the fact that he's talking about this as some sort of burden. The fact that he got up at the podium and really spread out the Dolphins' dirty laundry about how they're lacking in the leadership department, it is just feels like he's such a liability to this team on and off the field that it just feels like everything is wrong. It feels like this team is so fundamentally flawed from the foundation all the way up. It's not just the record, it's everything that has gone on behind closed doors. Fitz, I think it's a time to make a change at the quarterback position. I think it's time to make a change at the head coaching position. And frankly, I feel like the Chris Greer's position as general manager for this team has run its course, because he's the one that's put out a football team that is just not good enough to compete in the NFL. Right now, it feels like everything in Miami is so incredibly flawed. You have to clean house at this point. I don't see any hope or optimism or light at the end of the tunnel that the Dolphins can turn around and just be an okay average football team. This is a bad football team, and it starts at the root. It starts at the top.
I don't disagree that this is a bad football team, and that's also why I don't think that a change does anything today, right now, as we sit here. Like, I feel like at this point, the Dolphins have made it halfway up of a very tall mountain to hike. And they're looking at it and saying, okay, well, now what? Do we go the rest of the way to the top of the mountain and try and get to the helicopter to help bring us down? Or do we just try and go back downhill? And I don't think there's an easy answer. I think they're pot committed to where they are. Now, you mentioned Tua and Nick Saban, and that's why, like, I stack these bricks a little differently. Tua is coming out. Let's stack everything of what we've heard over the last year. We started hearing reports, almost a year ago, of players just skipping certain practices, players showing up late to certain meetings, like whatever the culture was. Mike McDaniel probably was getting walked over a little bit. We started to hear those reports about a year ago. Now, in the last few weeks, we've seen Tua come out and talk about the lack of leadership. And now he's talking about, hey, I'm trying to multitask. Like, you're looking at it saying, how does this guy that played for Nick Saban not understand his job? I'm looking at it saying, this guy that played for Nick Saban, that has always been around at some level locker rooms that were invested in being a certain kind of way. Now, how do we know he's not walking in trying to be a leader and just falling on deaf ears that don't really care for his leadership style, that don't really care for him, that don't really respond to how he gives his messaging? Because to me, what it feels like we have is an entire locker room that's lost. And I don't think Tua knows how to fix it. I don't think McDaniel knows how to fix it. Long term, I think it might be better for both of them to go other places and find other opportunities. But right now in this season, I can't find Miami winning more games with Quinn Ewers as their quarterback. That doesn't make any sense in my mind. I can't find Miami winning more games with an interim coach either. So to me, in this year, knowing you're 1-6 at this point, like, your season's done. So what are you going to try and win a few games for? To try and salvage something that is obviously broken? Or do you just go through the rest of this season and say, hey, we're going to get our ass kicked every week, and at the end of the season, we're going to figure out who's getting fired, who's not getting fired? We agree 1,000% on one thing. Chris Greer, the GM of the Dolphins, should not have a job anymore. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
He got to go.
I think the new GM needs to come in and decide, was the quarterback the problem? Was the coach the problem? How do we fix the problem long term? Maybe a complete house cleaning is in order. I just don't think it helps the Dolphins, or frankly, most franchises, to do it right now.
And I would like to say I never root for people to lose their jobs, but when things are so bad as they are in Miami, that's the kind of dysfunction that warrants a total and complete clean house. And yeah, you're right that if you fire Mike McDaniel right now and put Quinn Ewers in, does that make you all of a sudden a playoff contender? Absolutely not. It felt like the Dolphins season was over, really, actually, after week 1. It felt like the Dolphins season was already on thin ice, even going into this season. There's been nothing that we have seen to make me feel otherwise. But I do think what a change does is reinvigorates a fan base, is at least instills hope into a fan base of, we have this under control. We know that we have a certain expectation and a certain threshold for success that is not just not being met. It is so far from not being met that it is almost inconceivable how bad this football team is. It reinvigorates a fan base, and it gives a fan base confidence that they can actually have grasp on this fan base, that we have a grasp on this team.
It lasted one half in Tennessee. It lasted one half in Tennessee. There was one half of hope before you realized, no, wait, we just suck. And now what hope do the Titans fans have for the rest of this season? Literally none.
A new coach. Like, that's where the hope comes from. Because as long as Brian Callahan was at the helm in Tennessee, Titans fans thought, well, why am I showing up for this team? Why am I showing up at these games and paying all the money that it takes to, find a parking spot and buy a ticket and buy concessions for a total and complete bozo as a head coach? That's how Titans fans felt.
You don't think that's the case now, though? You don't think after getting their ass kicked by Vrabel, like if the Dolphins go out and fire McDaniel and they get one half a good quarterback play out of it, and then all of a sudden it falls apart, the fans still aren't going to come. Like I think
it's the hope of a coaching search. It's the hope of a new regime. As long as Mike McDaniel is the head coach in Miami, why would Miami Dolphins fans feel like anybody in decision-making power has any sort of grasp on this situation?
They don't, but I don't think to that end, I don't think a change right now is going to get butts in the seats or excitement growing for the rest of this season. You're going to have to get through this season and get to the coaching hiring cycle. We agree that fans are getting kicked in the teeth right now if you're a Miami Dolphins fan. I just think where we disagree is I don't think that there's any hope that comes from firing your coach. You're going to have 1 week of like, well, maybe we won't suck this week. And then by halftime, you're like, oh, yeah, sorry, we still suck. I'm just not going to watch the games anymore. Like, it's just at some point you realize
the team
you're just
sucks.
screwed.
Yeah, the team sucks, and the team is going to suck no matter who is the head coach. But making up some sort of change, I think, is pledging to your fan base the commitment that you have to winning, because you're not winning right now.
What's going to be wild is to see if Tua gets a shot. Like quarterback redemption, we talk about all the time. We have seen very good from Tua. It will be wild to see if somebody else can find good in Tua or if this is just the new Tua. And frankly, I think it'll be wild to see what the interest is in McDaniel. Like, I don't know that he's a 500 coach today. Even at 1-6, he's a 500 coach. He's won half of his games as the coach of the Miami Dolphins, which is crazy. I can't remember the last time a coach that was as respected as he was in the first 2 years of his career has suddenly fallen off to the point that I don't even know if anybody would want him. Like, that's the crazy part about it, Caroline. Like, to have at least had 500 success and have a quarterback that I think is a liability for you right now would usually be a reason he'd be a hot coach in the next cycle. I don't know if coach or quarterback are hot in the next cycle.
I think Mike McDaniel maybe has proven that, yes, he's a brilliant offensive mind, but with how much this locker room culture has gone off the rails, maybe he's proven that he's not a great head coach. I think Mike McDaniel would be a very desirable offensive coordinator, very desirable offensive mind to bring in, because I think that's what he does best. Like, if you just let Mike McDaniel cook on the offense, and then all of the extracurriculars, the press conferences, the culture building, like, leave that to the head coach. Just let Mike McDaniel cook on the X's and O's. I think that's his sweet spot. Like, if I'm, looking around to upgrade my offense, I think Mike McDaniel will be the very first call that I would make. Tua, on the other hand, I think he's kind of shown us who he is, and that is not a starting quarterback in the NFL.
It'll be interesting because that's what we said about Daniel Jones, too. All right, coming up, the great Stephen Godfrey going to join the show. Can Diego Pavio win the Heisman? We'll answer that next. Just pin this eyeball emoji. Let's get some thoughts on that from the man that tweeted it out. College Football Inquirer Stephen Godfrey back to explain. All right, give it to me, man. Why do we have eyeball emojis out there? What are we hinting at?
That's the history. That's a thing I started doing because I stopped breaking coaching news, and I would use the eyeball emoji to say, "Hey, you need to pay attention today." Now, the reason why I said just pin this, being a little facetious or overdramatic, was it's going to be a bloodbath here for the next couple weeks, guys. So rather than me drop it 2 hours before something happens, let's just keep it pinned. Okay? Nobody's safe. Buyouts don't exist anymore. And I think we're going to see some major programs with some frustrated fan bases. I don't know, maybe a co-host of the show could express her feelings about a frustrated fan base right now. You're going to see some people act like they're not high dollar figures attached to dismissing some of these coaches and moving on.
I mean, we've already had, 9 head coaches in college football get fired? It's not even Halloween.
Yes.
Like,
Yes,
it's already
and
spooky season.
This was supposed to be the year that didn't happen anymore. Remember that, guys? You remember that whole narrative over the offseason? Like, oh, you know what? The way it's structured now, there's going to be so many teams in the playoff. You don't have to worry about this. And, the portal's going to affect that. The exact reverse has happened. There's a psychological change going on amongst those people with deep pockets in college football. And what they are deciding is, rather than worry about where the money's going to come from, the bigger risk right now is to look like you are complacent. Because you remember last year's coaching search cycle? It was really, really thin. The Southeastern Conference did not replace a coach for the first time in, I think, 6 or 7 years, which is kind of unheard of. And now we're on the brink of maybe as many 4 or 5 in that league alone.
So
how much do you believe the successes of Vanderbilt and Indiana and Georgia Tech have expedited this process? How much hotter are the seats of Brian Kelly and Mike Norvell and Brent Venables and Lincoln Riley because these lower tier programs are legitimate college football playoff contenders?
I like that as a hypothesis. Nobody's going to admit that right now because it's very uncomfortable to do so. But I like that idea because college football, as a rule, hates a usurper, which is just a fancy way of saying that when someone who we feel like in college football amongst the traditional programs and the helmets, right? If we feel like one of those schools doesn't belong and it starts having success, we find a way to correct that. We don't like that as an industry. We never have. We probably never will. But because of the sort of triple threat of revenue sharing, NIL, and the portal all kind of happened at once, and there was no enforcement around it because of what was going on in Washington, D.C., and the NCAA is just sort of general fecklessness, we had this sort of crazy moment. We've had 30 years of change in about 3 seasons. So right now we're seeing schools where, hey, the value of an education at Vanderbilt or Georgia Tech has always been really good, right? And they produce a lot of deep-pocketed alumni, right? So what if those people now finally could legitimately contribute directly to the football program? You're seeing the result of that. Turns out that rich schools want to win too. And they want to be able to write a check and maybe show it on their taxes, unlike the old bagman days. And you are seeing schools that by our standards and our generation of football fandom normally have no business doing this. Like Indiana's for real, guys. They are a real program. They are probably the 3rd best program in the country right now behind Alabama and Ohio State.
3rd best program.
Jeez.
Define what you mean by 3rd best program.
Playing football currently on October 20th, 2025, year of our Lord. I'm not saying that they are the 3rd best program year in and year out. I would talk about something like Oregon. There are other schools that we can discuss, right? But as of right now, if we had the playoff tomorrow, I think Indiana is the 3rd best program playing football right now.
So how has Indiana been able to figure it out, Vandy, all these things? You make a very smart point with that. Why haven't the Michigan States and Wisconsins and Auburns and Floridas figured out the same thing? Like, how do we sit in this world where the middle class is suddenly wildly changed in college football?
I don't have a comfortable or polite way of saying this. You have to be comfortable paying kids money, and that has not caught up in a lot of cultures in college football. And if you were previously successful by not doing that, a lot of people who write the checks feel like, well, we shouldn't be paying the labor. Indiana worked out an aggressive, selfless system to go out. Now, first off, they hired a great coach who, by the way, technically comes off the Saban tree. He was an assistant on the very first Alabama team in 2007 under Nick Saban. He toiled in the FCS. He took a lot of jobs that we don't talk about, in the news. And then he kind of came in as a fully formed program manager who was really good at evaluating talent and also good at working in the margins, right? Finding the 2 stars who probably should be 3 or 4, 3 stars who should be 5. And they put together a really aggressive budget with a legitimate commitment to football in Indiana. There's a lot of money behind this, guys. The answer to most questions in college football is money. Why isn't this happening? Why didn't this happen correctly? It's either money that hasn't been spent or money that was spent the wrong way. Indiana is doing it correctly right now. And I think the Oregon win a couple weeks ago has at least muted some of the nonsense criticism. Oh, they didn't play anybody, Paul, all that kind of stuff. Indiana is as legit a team in a Power 2 conference as anybody else right now. And they would give Ohio State a game. They would give Alabama a game. They would give I guess right now we'd say maybe Texas A&M. They are legitimate because they have figured out the new rules better and faster than some of the legacy brands. This sport does not care about the logo on your helmet. We think it does. But if you're fast and you have ingenuity and you put money in the right places at the right time, you can beat the old guard. Now, the problem is, like I said at the top of the segment, the old guard will eventually catch up, right? So we can talk about LSU for a second. Down, frustrated, really poor implementation of NIL philosophically. Brian Kelly's not going to be the guy probably for the next age of college football, but LSU was caught in a weird period of time where people were still hiring to answer Nick Saban. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like you were either hiring a Saban guy or a guy who could beat Saban. And in LSU's case specifically, you were hiring a guy because you were so frustrated with Ed Orgeron, who gave you a perfect season in 2019, but was woefully inconsistent after that. They wanted their Nick Saban back. Psychologically, I don't know if you agree with me or not, psychologically, LSU has always been in this sort of existential identity crisis for losing Nick Saban and watching him win all those titles. So they went after this guy who was a statesman and a politician, right? The problem was he probably could have done a great job in the pre-NIL, the pre-portal era, the long-term build culture, because he did a good job with that at Notre Dame. We don't live in that world anymore. You are rebuilding your roster in perpetuity, which means every 12 months, you're going to have a 45% turnover at best. And that's a good situation. I don't think Brian Kelly's the right guy for that, but there's also, I could say that about probably 20 or 30 head coaches right now at the top of the game, at the highest levels of college football. So what do? Do you eat this giant buyout? Do you go and find someone else? The trick right now is that, actually, let me just ask you guys, who would you hire at LSU right now? Who do you like if you had to replace Brian Kelly right now? Who do you go chase?
Oh, see, that's a fascinating question because I don't know. Because following Brian Kelly, a guy who'd been to the college football playoff, who had coached a national championship, hiring that next hot, young, up-and-coming coordinator doesn't feel satisfactory. What are you going to hire? James Franklin? And get the exact same results that you've been getting?
Oh, God. Hey, please let me be there if they hire James Franklin. Let me hang out at the Baton Rouge Country Club for a week if they hire James Franklin. That's my kind of story.
My diploma back, Godfrey. I would hang
out. I would shadow Scott Woodward around the Baton Rouge Country Club for a week if they hired James Franklin. Oh, man, I could win a Pulitzer off that. That's a wonderful suggestion. The problem, and I kind of did this as an exercise. We talked a little bit about this on the College Football Inquirer on Yahoo, on the Fast Network. Tune in. That was a pretty good ad read, right?
That was well done.
Thank you. You guys are the professionals here. We talked about this. And Andy Staples, my co-host, brought up the idea. Do you guys remember when Urban Meyer was at Utah in the 2000s and he was the consensus guy? Florida got him, Notre Dame wanted him, but everybody in college football could agree on the guy. We don't really have an archetype right now. So a lot of these jobs are going to open and a lot of people are going to try and find the answer for the next generation of college football at their particular big university. But the problem is we don't really have a tree. We had the Saban tree. You either hired a guy who could beat Saban, right? So Gus Malzahn or Hugh Freeze, or you hired a guy who was like Saban. So Kirby Smart, and then on down the line of varying Saban assistants who may have worked out decent, bad, great, whatever. Who do you hire right now? I would hire tomorrow if I had a football program that had top end money. I would hire Dan Lanning. But I don't think Dan Lanning is going to go anywhere in the short term. His contract makes it pretty hard for that to happen. But do you hire Will Stein, his offensive coordinator? That feels premature, right? To your point, we're not necessarily at that point where it feels like we're just going to grab one of his guys. I might hire Kenny Dillingham, too, from Arizona State. But if I'm in the SEC, does Arizona State's resume, is that flashy and sexy enough for me? I don't know. But Kenny Dillingham has done this one thing that like a Brian Kelly never could. He doesn't have Brian Kelly's win-loss record or his prestige, but he damn sure can find things in the portal and use NIL and utilize social media in a way that some of these legacy head coaches can't. But are we hiring Kenny Dillingham somewhere? We might hire him at Florida State. I know they just came out with a statement about 30 minutes ago saying they're gonna keep Mike Norvell. If you believe that, I have some lovely investment properties for you. They'll keep him for the next couple of weeks, but things in Tallahassee have never been worse. So we don't really have a tree. So what you're going to see in the short term is poaching. You're going to see sitting head coaches take mega deals to go to another school. We saw a little bit of that in the 21 cycle, 22. I think you're going to see more of it until the industry can catch up with the supply and demand problem of head coaching.
So let's take that logic and apply it to Florida, because I have heard Lane Kiffin to Gainesville, Florida fans clamoring for that for years, like for 2 years now. One, is Lane Kiffin that caliber of coach? Two, if you're Lane Kiffin, is Florida a better job than Ole Miss right now?
Technically, yes. I am an alumni of that university. And technically, yes. No matter what happens, I think there will always be a little bit of an existential divide between haves and have-nots in the Southeastern Conference. Now, the margin between haves and have-nots has never been smaller, because you might have a situation where Clark Lee is recruited by Penn State, and Clark Lee might opt to stay at Vanderbilt. How strange would that be? That's just a hypothetical here. So the margin between these jobs has never been smaller. But I do think if you had to just break it all down on paper, Florida is marginally better for head coach X, not necessarily Lane Kiffin, but just any candidate coming in. Now, it's not like it was 5 or 10 or even 2 years ago when you saw Lane Kiffin sort of rebuke Auburn. This is going to be a Lane Kiffin question. And I think here's what's really interesting to me, watching the Lane Kiffin glow up in PR the last couple of years. Lane Kiffin was not the caliber of coach that Florida wanted, and I know that because that's what Florida told people during the last cycle when they were looking at coaches, and a lot of Florida fans said, oh, we would really like Lane Kiffin. He's got the swagger. He's got the Spurrier thing, right? They said, no, absolutely not, because of the off-field stuff. You guys remember all the rumors at Alabama. You remember the off-field behavior, the divorce, just kind of let's just say, for the sake of not getting sued, just messiness. There's some messiness around his character. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair.
He was like a reality show character. Okay. Isn't it interesting to me, that all we hear about from Lane Kiffin now is yoga and Bible verses, and ESPN just produced an entire SEC network documentary about how he's a changed man and he's this enigma and he's calmer. Here's why that's genius manufacturing. That's genius narrative construction by the way, on the part of Lane and his representation at CAA. If you're Ole Miss, you feel like, oh, you know what? All Lane needed was to move to Oxford, Mississippi, and just like he's home now and his family loves it and all this crap that I hear from Oxford, right? So it's great because it reaffirms all of the inherent bias of the school that employs him. And they worship him like a king. Don't get it twisted. They would be gutted if he left. All right. But simultaneously, if you're in a leadership position at a place like Florida, where you previously thought, oh, this guy's a little spicy, he's a little sketchy off the field, I don't know, he's inconsistent. Now you have the actual SEC network going to bat for him and saying he's a changed man, he's mature, he's grown into this role, look how different he is. And on top of that, this is a one-loss team on the verge of a playoff bid. And I don't care how things have changed a lot in 3 years, like I've said. You take Ole Miss to the playoff, that's not supposed to happen. That's a usurper. That's something that shouldn't happen in college football. And it's going to make you look like a miracle worker. So here's the good news for Lane, barring him just bottoming out in November. He's in the best possible situation he could be. And I don't know what works better for him. If it's Gainesville and he's just closer to his boat down in Miami, or if it's staying in Mississippi with the family, because I do know the family is sort of dug in to Oxford. Either way, I think it's fine, because Ole Miss is going to continue to give him whatever he wants within reason. They have done this so far. It would be fascinating to me if he goes to Florida, because, and I'm going to jump forward and probably put too much in this segment, Auburn is going to open. Okay. Auburn believes they're going to get John Summerall from Tulane. If Ole Miss is open and Auburn is open, John Summerall is going to have a more aggressive market for him than Lane Kiffin will. So we are going to see a feeding frenzy out of panic and desperation in the next 6 or so weeks. So yeah, Kiffin holds all the cards. By virtue, so does Jimmy Sexton, which, by the way, did you guys see Jimmy Sexton coming out of the tunnel with Lane at Georgia this weekend? They're not even subtle about this stuff. This is a sport within a sport. I could talk for hours about this.
You don't have to be Pablo, by the way, to uncover the CAA relationships with ESPN behind the scenes. You want to get a friendly documentary made at ESPN, CAA is helpful for that.
It ain't that hard. Yeah.
Conflict of interest, too.
I mean, 100%. So, okay, before we get you out of here, I know we got to, but real quick. All this conversation is really cute. Are we just glossing over the fact that Ohio State's going to win the national championship in a very boring way?
It's very possible. Although I will say, like, that Alabama War Machine shirt, it showed up like a month late, but oh damn! Like, okay, guys, here we go again. For all the change that we just talked? So let me kill the whole segment here. All the change, and Georgia Tech and Vanderbilt are going to the playoff. Guess what? The national title is going to be. Right
Ohio
now,
State, Alabama.
It's Ohio State. Oh, without a doubt. Like, I mean, it's brutal right now. They're both gearing up to like that foregone conclusion where they both just sort of play 3/4 like trash compactor football, kind of vintage, like first era Saban and Tuscaloosa. Both of them kind of have that mentality right now. And they're like, you know what? We don't need to be flashy. We don't need to win. We don't need to be out there pitching the media. We don't need style points. We will just be the most like boring and reductive defense and just sort of clamp you down for 3/4. And in Bama's case right now, they probably have the Heisman winner at quarterback. So we're just going to out-talent you and be really boring about the way we do it. That has not changed. The very top of the sport still pretty much. The very, very tip top is the same. The world will get over a Georgia Tech Indiana playoff game. We'll all make it.
And then we'll end up with the championship game that is boring, and everybody will say
that's what we always do.
It's inevitable. It is classic. We appreciate your time, as always, guys. Check out College Football Inquirer on the Fast Networks, and always doing great work there. Follow him on social media at 38 Godfrey. Stephen Godfrey, man, appreciate your time. Thanks for your insight this morning.
Thank you all. Have a good morning.
Thanks, Godfrey. Appreciate you.
Such great work by him. So inevitable. Is it inevitable that the 49ers are actually good? They're not the only team we're trying to figure out. We'll break it down next. Christian McCaffrey had himself a night, 129 rushing yards, 72 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns for a short-handed San Francisco team that absolutely gave it to the Falcons. And they're one of a few teams in the NFL that we're looking around saying, man, is it time to just simplify things? Is this team actually good? There's a difference between winning football games and being a good football team. We say that all the time on this show, Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz. So let's start with San Francisco. They're 5-2 They looked like they were done last week after losing Fred Warner. Are they actually good?
Yes. I think the 49ers are good. And here's the difficult conversation about the 49ers. If the 49ers are totally healthy, they are a Super Bowl contender. The 49ers are not totally healthy. They're getting they're losing two of their best defensive players for the entire year. We've seen a lot more of Mac Jones than I think any of us anticipated, but yet they are still 5-2. Like, we talk a lot about Christian McCaffrey and how he is injury prone, and we're all just kind of holding our breath, waiting for something bad to happen to Christian McCaffrey. Let me just say, I don't hope it happens. I never wish injury on anyone, but that's just kind of the tale of Christian McCaffrey's career. He's injury prone. But Christian McCaffrey has the game of the season yesterday, 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, he looked like vintage Christian McCaffrey. It feels like even though this 49ers team has been riddled with injury, every single week it's something else or someone new who steps up and makes a big statement. If it's not Mac Jones, it's Christian McCaffrey. If it's not Christian McCaffrey, it's this injury-riddled defense that really steps up and holds the Atlanta Falcons to just 10 points and Bijan Robinson to just 2.9 yards per carry. So yes, even in the face of the injury bug, the 49ers are a good team. Are they trustworthy? I don't know, but they're a good team.
Yeah, I think 100% they're a good team. And look at the last month. They lose to the Jags. They have a tight game against the Rams. They lose to the Bucks, and now they beat the Falcons. Like, that's a gauntlet of a month to have to go through. And they went through that decimated by injuries, and they still sit here at 5-2. In fact, if you look at their remaining schedule, I think they'll be favored in at least 6 or 7 of their remaining games. So according to Vegas, they're going to get to 11 or 12 wins pretty easily. And if they get to 11 or 12 wins, with Mac Jones playing, by the way, just holding this thing down at the quarterback position, when Brock Purdy comes back, I do want to remind you that Brock Purdy is, as much as the world doesn't love Brock Purdy, 49ers do. That's why they paid him. They're going to get their starting quarterback back. Yes, this is a good football team. That one was easy. What about Green Bay? Let's go to another team. Green Bay, they get a comeback win against Arizona, 27-23, a wild game that would have been the lead of wild games if it were not for the wild game we saw with the Broncos. So is Green Bay actually good?
I think. I think they should be. Like, when you look at this game, when you break down this game, what did the Packers do poorly? You know, they ran the ball fine. I mean, like, Jordan Love didn't throw any picks. Like, they ran for 4 yards a carry. They forced a turnover. They didn't turn the ball over themselves. I mean, yeah, they had a bunch of penalties, and that was dumb, but like, there wasn't anything that the Packers did that was like, oh man, like, that was bad. The Packers are just annoying. Like, the Packers just can't quite seem to break away. When you feel like the Packers should have an opportunity to just roll, they don't. And I think the biggest thing for me, the most glaring thing to me that makes the Packers frustrating or annoying, or the reason why I can't say the Packers are elite, the reason why I say good question mark, is because of Jordan Love. Like, I think we were so quick to crown Jordan Love the next great one. How many times have we heard Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love? Well, I mean, like, that's not what Jordan Love is. We cannot put Jordan Love in the Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers conversation if he is as wildly inconsistent as he has been this season. Can Jordan Love elevate to the level of looking like an Aaron Rodgers and a Brett Favre? Sure. Like, we've seen Jordan Love look like an elite quarterback. We saw that late in the season last year. But we don't see that from Jordan Love consistently enough to put him in that same Green Bay Packers elite quarterback MVP Super Bowl caliber conversation. So I think it's because Jordan Love is so wildly inconsistent is why I can't trust this Packers team, why this Packers team feels so incredibly frustrating. On the other side, though, speaking of frustrating, look at the Arizona Cardinals. They lost to the Packers by 4 when they had a lead in that game. Lost to the Colts by 4 the week before. Lost to the Titans by 1 the week before in a crazy weird game. Lost to the Seahawks by 3. Lost to the Niners by 1. Like, the Arizona Cardinals are 2-5, but they're not getting blown out. The Arizona Cardinals are right there in so many of these games, which makes that frustrating in its own right.
Yeah, the Cardinals might be one of the most cursed seasons I've ever seen in the NFL, the way they're losing football games.
Voodoo.
But, you know, one thing that's interesting to me, I like to look sometimes as we get later in the season at point differential, just because I think it's an interesting way to just see how the season's going. And the funny thing is the point differential for Green Bay, even though they're 4-1-1, the point differential is only 33. They're plus 33, which you could turn around and say, wow, that's like for a team with that record, that's not great. Then you look at the rest of the NFC and realize that that's the fourth best point differential for any team with a winning record. So, like, it just shows you that this year in the NFC, all these games are being won by close margins, right? Like, so at some point, I'm with you. If I have to, like, we need a word other than suck, and we need a word other than great. Like, are the Packers good? They're okay, but I bet my house on the Packers to win? No, I wouldn't. They shouldn't have been in the dogfight they were in yesterday with the Cardinals. They needed an absolute monster game from Micah Parsons, and I don't trust Jordan Love. So the Packers are fine, but I don't think the Packers are good. Like, when I think good, like the Packers, you went out for steak. You couldn't afford a nice steakhouse. You went to like a chain that's not all that great, and the steak was fine. That's what the Packers are just fine. There's nothing like elite about them. What about Denver? Denver gets the big win yesterday. So are we now going to say that the Broncos are good? Because, like, here's the thing, Caroline. I can't erase what we saw early from Bo Nix, and I can't erase what we saw late from Bo Nix. Bo Nix had, I think, 45 yards rushing in the fourth quarter alone. This team put up 33 points in the fourth quarter. They did something wildly historic. But we also watched a meltdown by the Giants where, frankly, if they just run the ball late and force the usage of timeouts instead of throwing a ball that turned into an interception, they'd have won this football game. So, like, I don't know what to make of the Broncos. Like, I can't sit here and say the Broncos are good. The eye test for the Broncos shows me they're nowhere near where, like, the Kansas City Chiefs are, right? So the Broncos won that game. But I don't have any confidence in Denver moving forward.
No, I don't either. I don't want to say the Broncos aren't a good football team, but I also don't think that they are a good football team. I mean, it takes a monumental, wild, crazy fourth quarter with 3 lead changes in the last several minutes in order to beat a Giants team with a rookie quarterback, albeit a very good and exciting rookie quarterback, but still. I mean, let's not pretend that the Broncos looked like they didn't belong on the same field as the Giants for the first 3 quarters. Like, it was an epic meltdown from the Giants, and the Broncos had to get a whole lot of luck to swing their way in order to win that game. It was 2 missed field goals. It was the failed 2-point conversion. Like, that's 4 points that the Giants just left on the field right there. And Broncos one by one. Like, there were so many avenues for the Giants to just close this game out. But, I mean, yes, the Broncos get credit for a 33-point fourth quarter. My goodness gracious, they get credit for that. But, like, I didn't see anything overly, sexy about Bo Nix or this Broncos team. I didn't see anything from this Broncos team that gave me a whole lot of confidence that they can go the different distance, that they can be a legitimate contender in the AFC, because luck just happened to swing their way at the right time. I can't give credit to the Broncos fourth quarter and ignore the first 3.
Yeah, I mean, just look, we do this a lot on the show, but look at the remaining schedule. The Broncos are going to have to take on the Cowboys this week. That Cowboys offense is going to carve up the way the Broncos defense has been playing. There's no doubt in my mind. They still have 2 games left against the Chiefs. They still have to take on the Packers and the Jags, who are better than we expected them to be. They still have a game left against the Chargers, who already beat them this year. And then they have the Commanders. Let's see where Jayden Daniels' health lines out in this. But there's a gauntlet left. So I hear, look, they're 5-2. And at some point, you're 5-2, and everybody needs to step back and respect, oh, my God, look at where they are. But as you've said before and I've said before, there's a difference between being a playoff team and being a good football team. And this Broncos team, I mean, for everything that they did last night or yesterday afternoon, it was absolutely insane and will be remembered forever.
Yeah.
As great as all of that was, you were in that position at home against the Giants? Like, that's just – none of that made sense. This is a Giants team that shouldn't have put you in that stressor in the first place. This is a Giants team that shouldn't have been doing it to that defense. And so better to be lucky than good. And I'll credit the Broncos for getting a really nice win out of this thing. Got a little luck, Caroline, but I'm not banking on luck. I'm not banking on that scratch off to pay my mortgage this month. The Broncos are winning football games. Huzzah. I don't think that makes them a good football team right now, especially if Bo Nix doesn't figure out how to play consistently. He doesn't even have to be lights out like he was at the end of this game, and he was great. He's just got to be consistently better than he was when he was living in the sea of suck for the first 3 quarters.
This offense isn't good. Like, it's not. I understand that there was an absolute point explosion in the fourth quarter. I get that. But Bo Nix has not been very good. This Broncos offense has not been particularly good. And with Sean Payton at the helm, like that doesn't make sense. That shouldn't be that. This offense shouldn't be as inconsistent and stagnant at times as it is, because it was stagnant. It was bad in the first 3 quarters. I mean, the Broncos have never been shut out at home, and they were trending that way yesterday against the Giants. Obviously, they didn't, and a team doesn't get in trouble for things that didn't happen. But still, like it was so bad in the first 3 quarters that almost is a bigger deal to me than what the fourth quarter comeback was. And credit to the Broncos. They figured it out. They found a way to win. And in the NFL, you just have to figure it out and find a way to win. You know, the bad and ugly wins count just the same as the dominant ones. But that, in my own personal hierarchy, in my own view of who are legitimate contenders, like that's when that counts and that's when that matters. And I can't count on the Broncos to be a legitimate contender if they look as bad as they did in the first 3 quarters.
The Rams looked excellent in London, and all of a sudden it has us wondering, are we forgetting about Stafford in the MVP conversation? We'll tell you about it next. Stafford's MVP odds with the little graph chart is because Matt Stafford yesterday had another day, yet another day of, oh my God, why aren't we paying more attention to Matt Stafford, especially in a big Rams win? Caroline Fenton, Jason Fitz, look at that. Stafford's MVP odds plus 1,100 on BetMGM. And I'm just wondering at what point we're going to have to couch that conversation a little differently, Caroline, because certainly when you look at the way the Jags just got embarrassed in London, I made the comment on this show that, you know, London has been a decade watching bad Jags teams. It was about time they got to watch a good one, and then that Jags team forgot to show up. The Rams win 35-7. Devontae has himself a day, and oh my God, in the process, Matt Stafford threw, I think it was to 8 different people on the first quarter. The ability for them to spread the ball out was really incredible. I kept watching just a magician work at quarterback.
And we also need to remember there was no Puka Nacua in this game. That the Rams offense was humming. It was explosive without their number one receiver. We talked about this last week. Can Devontae Adams step up and fill in the absence of Puka Nacua? And I said, yes, because that's just what Sean McVay does. He puts his receivers and all of his playmakers in positions to make plays. And that's exactly what we saw from a 3-touchdown day for Devontae Adams. It's not really rocket science. It's actually, pretty much a cheat code. Hey, just take the ball and give it to that guy who's going to be in the end zone, and then you'll win. Seems pretty simple to me. But to your point, I don't think that we talk enough about Matthew Stafford and how reliable he is, how great he is. Like, we saw the tweet that Matthew Stafford's MVP odds are skyrocketing. They should be skyrocketing because he was 21 of 33, 182 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Like, I don't know how much more efficient you can get than that. And we don't talk about Matthew Stafford in the same tier of quarterback that we talk about Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. And I don't think he is Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, but we don't talk about Matthew Stafford nearly enough in that really great to elite category. I feel like his name just is so easy to forget about. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because Matthew Stafford's old. I don't know if it's because he, quarterbacks under Sean McVay and we just give Sean McVay all the credit. I don't know if it's just because we've grown so accustomed to seeing this from Matthew Stafford week in and week out, so we don't really, talk about it in the same vein that we should, or that we talk about other quarterbacks. But Matthew Stafford, when you see it right there, 17 touchdowns and only 2 picks on the year. Like, that is MVP level quarterbacking, and we don't talk about him like that, and we should, Fitz. I think it's criminal that we don't talk about Matthew Stafford as much as we really should.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about somebody that, as we sit right now, is third in the NFL in yards passing at 1866. And by the way, he's about 50 yards back from Justin Herbert at the top of this list, with a higher yards per attempt than either of the guys, Dak and Herbert, that are ahead of him. You mentioned it, 17 touchdowns more than either of the guys that are ahead of him. 2 interceptions less than either of the guys that are ahead of him. Higher passer rating than either of the guys ahead of him. Like, we have to understand that the quarterback position isn't just about making miraculous plays. Like, yes, it's absolutely incredible to watch, Patrick Mahomes no look at defense and just right out of their shoes. No idea what's coming. Doesn't even look there, throws the ball. That's amazing to watch. But there is something to be said for still traditional quarterbacking where, hey, I drop back and I'm going to carve you up. I'm going to find the open man and I'm going to beat you over and over and over again. The number of accurate passes in the middle of defenses that weren't quite there for the Jags was incredible to me. And at some point we look at it and I think like we love to give credit to everybody else. So it becomes Sean McVay is such a savant, or it becomes, but you got the greatest receivers. And at some point, how much of it is just simply Stafford understands this offense, is running this offense at an electric level, is playing with so much efficiency and confidence in the system. Like, he's the anti-Tua. Like, we're looking at a quarterback that just gets more and more and more comfortable every day that he's with McVay. And a quarterback that we spent the summer obsessing about a back over that no longer seems to even be a conversation. Like, your back doesn't get better as you get older. We all said it. Now we all look like fools for saying it because Stafford is playing so confidently and so efficiently. He's not really getting hit. He's getting rid of the ball quickly. Like, everything you could ask for, he's doing. And in the process, the Rams look like one of the best teams in the NFL. Like, that is a complete MVP formula, no matter how you slice it up.
100%. And that's a complete Super Bowl formula. You have a reliable quarterback like Matthew Stafford. You have just an absolute arsenal of weapons, because even though not a single Rams receiver had more than 50 receiving yards, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different Rams receivers record at least one catch. Like, he was spreading the ball around. They weren't exceptional on the ground against the Jags. They didn't really have to be because the passing game was working so well. But on any given night, whether it's Kyren Williams or Blake Corum, like, they can get you on the ground as well. And then the Rams defense. We talk so much about the Rams offense because it's Sean McVay and he is an offensive-minded head coach. The Rams defense had 7 sacks on Trevor Lawrence yesterday. I mean, it held the Jags to just 1 single touchdown. That is, a Super Bowl formula. Quarterback, receivers, run game, head coach that's been there before, and a defense that can be as stifling as the Rams defense was yesterday. So credit to the Rams there. But on the flip side, I'm concerned about Trevor Lawrence and just the sheer number of sacks that he's taking. Rams got to him 7 times yesterday, took 7 sacks against the Seahawks, 3 against the Chiefs the week before. I mean, that's 17 sacks in the last 3 games. And I know you're going up against the Seahawks, one of the best defenses in the National Football League, and how, vicious the Rams were against Trevor Lawrence yesterday. That's 2 really good defenses. But still, I mean, like, 17 sacks in the last 3 games, 14 in the last 2. That's unsustainable.
I mean, that what we saw from Jacksonville yesterday is the exact proof positive of how they're built this year. When their defense causes turnovers and their defense is ahead of the opposing team, they're going to win a lot of football games. But they've been winning in spite of Trevor Lawrence week in and week out. And that just, you continued to see it in this game. Like, Trevor Lawrence looked surprised so often throughout the course of the game. Trevor Lawrence looked like he didn't know where to go with the football. And frankly, you mentioned the sacks, but even on the fourth down at the end of the game when, my God, they needed something from it. One of the fourth downs they went for, Trevor Lawrence takes a sack, and you just sit there and you watch it and you think, my God, how does this continually happen? Like, there is a moment here where we have just not seen any growth from Trevor Lawrence, even in this Liam Cohen offense, which was supposed to be the key. Remember, Liam Cohen did a great job as an offensive coordinator of figuring out how to run the football, which is exactly what he's doing in Jacksonville. But we're watching, sort of in this process, we're watching Trevor Lawrence melt. We're watching the Jags receivers melt. We're watching this offense become just a joke as we go week through week from a passing standpoint. And if the Jags don't get that figured out, I don't care how many games their defense can win them. They can't win serious football games in December if they can't throw the ball at all.
Play good defense, run the football, force turnovers. Like, that is the Jags' recipe for success. And they didn't do that. They couldn't run the ball yesterday. You see it there, only 44 yards on the ground for Travis Etienne. I always get Travis and Trevor mixed up. My apologies to the Etienne family. But only 44 rushing yards for Etienne. Didn't force a single turnover. Like, the Jags can't win games that way. And I think it kind of exposes maybe the funky and fluky ways the Jags have won football games in the past. Again, those still count the exact same as the dominant ones, but the Jags have become a really difficult football team to trust because all of those things have to go right in order for them to win games with an unreliable quarterback. And we didn't see that yesterday.
Yeah. By the way, all you got to do is just do the Stephen A. and just be like, buy that running back over there. And you just don't mention the name at all. And you're perfectly safe. Also,
shade to Stephen A. Fit that one in the show. Just in the nick of time, Fitzy.
Look, that's what makes Stephen A. Stephen A. I will say the MVP race is going to be interesting because Stafford's going to put up video game numbers. Daniel Jones is doing incredible things with the Colts. And as we've talked about repeatedly, Dak Prescott is putting up video game numbers also. So just a reminder that quarterbacks come in all shapes and sizes. We'll keep breaking it down tomorrow right here, 9 a.m. Eastern for Yahoo Sports Daily. She's Caroline Fenton. I'm Jason Fitz. Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out.